We're about to start off on your bill, S-101, with Senator Parent's amendment. Let me say beforehand, Senator Parent, I think you know this very well, that we have always viewed these issues within our housing promotion bill as one where we were going to defer to natural resources on, because this is sort of outside, Act 250 is outside our area of expertise. But
And I'm going there at 11:10 this morning as well.
we understand that. So I'm guessing we'll certainly listen to what you and Ellen have to say, but I'm guessing we're going to defer to them on in terms of a position from the committee, but we'll talk about that among ourselves, or take no position and just let them get up on the floor and talk about it. But I appreciate you taking the time to come in and present these things. I will say that this committee supports eliminating the duplication in Act 250 to promote housing, but it seems like the politics around Act 250 is toxic. So go ahead and
unlike all the other things we deal with.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the time, Senator Sorokin, and in all honesty, this was I know a bill that you guys, or this is language you guys supported last year, 5-0 out of committee. I asked Ellen to draft it as it left your committee. And then seeing this bill, I support, first of all, I support 101 100%. I'll support the bill with or without this amendment in it. But my goal is, I actually think we had broad agreement across the Senate last year on this downtown language. I think as we look to come out of COVID and with these resources that are coming available to invest in affordable housing, and I took a new job 6 months ago with the town of St. Albans where I do some planning work, and it's doing so much development where we already have infrastructure makes so much sense. There's a great book on it called Strong Towns by an engineer out of Minnesota, and really redeveloping areas and not building new infrastructure. And I think we all agree with that method moving forward. So I was hoping that this amendment at the very least would start the discussion and make sure we don't lose progress on the work we did last year where we all agreed. I know there were some things we disagreed on Act 250, but this was language that I believe the governor, the league supported, affordable housing advocates supported, this committee did. And ultimately, just getting the idea back out there that we should exempt downtowns and neighborhood development, areas from Act 250 where they already have strong local permitting processes. And again, the language, it bakes local housing authority considerations into the state designation process for downtowns and NDAs. The amendment ensures that these areas remain affordable. It adds the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board as a member of the Downtown Development Board. And then finally, it just makes a few technical corrections to the existing priority housing project exemption by bringing mixed income housing requirements in line with the Vermont Housing Finance Agency's current practices. So again, it's not new language to you. I understand it's kind of coming in here, but really what I'm hoping for in putting this amendment forward is a commitment to try to address this issue this year or next year at the latest, because I worry, as someone, again, in my new day job in the town, we have money coming to us, but figuring out how to spend that money and spending that money efficiently is a whole other issue. And if we get caught in permitting issues, we're not going to be able to put that money to use as well as possible. And especially with housing in downtowns like St. Albans City and Brattleboro or Burlington, I think we could try to make that a little more efficient.
Well, I appreciate that. And as I said before, personally, I think this committee supports the idea of going forward and making these changes, but apparently there's some balancing act here, which is beyond me in terms of letting these changes go in Act 250. So I think it's last year, I can't remember whether the bill formally went to natural resources, but certainly I made a commitment to Senator Bray that these are issues that we support it in principle, but in terms of the politics, we knew that there were other issues that were beyond this committee's jurisdiction, and also some of the substantive areas in planning and act in Title 10 and Title 24 that we don't have the expertise in. So we're with you in terms of putting the idea out there, but somehow somebody has to go to the hoop and complete the project. Let me ask the committee. I mean, we could spend another 10 minutes right now having Ellen walk through the bill. It's the exact same language, right, from last year. So we sort of know it. Senator Parent's testifying in natural resources at 11. I'm not 100% sure of the protocol, but if I assume it's appropriate for either Senator Ballin or myself to stand up and just say, we had Senator Parent in, this is sort of not the substantive area of our expertise, and we have no opinion on his amendment, or we defer to the natural resources position. If that's okay with everybody, we can let Ellen and Senator Parent go and just proceed along that way, and we can return to S10.
Let me just ask you a question on that score. This is language, as I understand it, that we approved last year. How did we, as we dealt with it last year, how did we deal with it? Did we pass the ball, or did we take an affirmative action? I'm just trying to recall.
We passed these provisions.
That's what I thought.
Yes, but we said when we passed these provisions, similar to what we did with the sewer hookup on S33,
Right.
we said we realize this is outside of our expertise, and the bill has to be reviewed by natural resources. And the hope was, I think natural resources was hoping that they could pass our language as well and reach some sort of agreement on Act 250, and then it sort of blew up. So these sections, if I understand, the balance of S237 made it to the House, but these sections didn't even make it to the House.
No, I believe, because I think it's how you define balance. And I think I was on natural resources last year. We were supportive of this language as someone who probably was less supportive of the other stuff that went over. I think the balance was out of whack for at least the governor. I mean, we saw the governor end up vetoing the whole bill when it got watered down. And so I think it's where we define balance, and why, and I get that total push, but at some point, again, we just have to do good public policy. And I think this is good for downtowns, and have that other discussion maybe at another time about where else we do. And so that's what I'm trying to push here is, we know we need 5,000 housing units a year, and this is a big, stumbling block to doing that.
Well, I appreciate that comment. I'm not there yet without having further conversations with our Natural Resources Committee. I mean, there may come a point where, we say, Act 250 politics be damned. We want to do this, but I'm definitely not knowledgeable enough yet on the landscape to say that, and I haven't had the what would be proper conversations, I think, with others before I could say that.
Mr. Chair, may I just say something briefly? I think we can't talk about Act 250 exemptions in a vacuum. I think that's what this taught us last year, is that it has to be part of the Act 250 reform. And as much as we support smart growth, cluster development in our downtowns and village centers, getting rid of duplicative permitting, we all support those things. But I cannot support doing Act 250 things without the balance that we need with the rest of Act 250. So I think, unfortunately, this is a piece of Act 250 reform, which I feel very strongly about, but I would be loath to see this happen without the additional work that we need to balance the Act 250 reforms. And so I would agree with the chair that we should let the natural resources really be the lead on this, because, for those reasons.
Just a question, Mr. Chair, and that is, if the review of this had been placed in a different sequence, in that natural resources reviewed and favorably were inclined and it then came to this committee, what would this committee's position be at that point?
I think it would be favorable. If they said it was favorable, we're not looking at the bigger pictures of Act 250 or fully understanding Act 250, other than we've heard from a housing perspective, it's duplicative and it can promote smart growth. I think if that came to us as a proposal from them, I think we'd probably be on board. I
understand that Senator Parent is going to be visiting with Natural Resources this morning.
Yeah,
Yeah, I am. And again, my hope, I'm not under the illusion that this amendment passes today or on this bill, but I really want to get the forward thrust to take this topic up. And, if we can, get to an agreement there, I'm, more than happy if Natural Resources and so on says, yeah, we want to take this seriously and actually try to finish the work we started last year. I just worry that
basically that goes to Natural Resources today or whenever, and is favorably viewed upon, then the suggestion I would have would be for Senator Parent to come back to this committee, and this committee might react somewhat differently than it is at the moment.
That's fine. That's fine.
yeah. But the other challenge last year was that the House was taking the lead on the Act 250 reforms, and we were sort of waiting for it in the Senate. I mean, it was a timing issue too, not just a jurisdiction.
Yeah, it was COVID. There was a lot. I mean, we were right in the middle of this when COVID hit. And
Right.
As a practical matter, though, if we wait for all of Act 250 to be reformed before we deal with something that's critical for housing, we will all be in a nursing home or beyond.
Right. And that was that's absolutely correct. And that's why I said my position might come to change at some point, but I need to know more before I make that commitment. And the other thing I would be concerned about more than anything at this particular juncture is that hopefully none of this stalls the underlying bill. So we want to move that forward. Anyhow, thank you, Ellen, for your contribution this morning. and thank you, Senator Parent.
And thank you guys for your time.
Yep.
See you in a little bit.
Yep.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before we go on to S10, I want to or rather button up the amendment snafu that we had on S79 yesterday on the floor. I just sent you a draft that Damien and I were working on last night and this morning. I think this will take care of it. David Hall. Did I say Damien?
Yeah.
Sorry, David Hall.
Oh, I didn't see a document attached to the thing between you and David.
The document wasn't attached?
I just saw an exchange between the two of you.
Okay.
This an email? I see it. Okay.
All right, if it's not there, I will try this again. I thought it was attached.
No, unattached.
Yeah.
Okay, let's try this. And I'll send it to the whole committee plus Nathan. Okay, sorry about that. Let's try this again. Do you have it in your inbox?
Yes, just came.
Okay. So just to remind you, what had happened is the Appropriates Amendment stripped out VHIP in its entirety, language and money. We were trying to put the language back in so it would keep moving, keep the appropriations for the big bill. But what happened was the amendment that Allison had never put that section back in. So she was referring to a section in the bill that no longer existed. So that's just the simple version. So this should be putting VHIP language back in minus the appropriation.
Can we, did you do this in a way so that we can do this all in one step? The last committee amendment is incorporated in here, or do we have to pass this first and then do the committee amendment?
I think we need to do this first, but I don't have the other committee amendment in front of me. Allison, do you have it handy?
Well, you could look at it.
I mean, I don't have the SAC amendment. I have the other one, the one we passed.
This looks like it has the changes we made after we voted out the bill in it. I just looked at this subordination of lien language. It looks
Yep.
like it's the new language. Doesn't it look that way on page 6?
Yeah, it has the report, but
So it's
Yeah.
incorporating,
it,
it's
it has
incorporating
different-
both.
It has different numbers, but I mean, I just have to pull out my other,
Well, what's a flashpoint for you, Senator Clarkson, as a section we should look at to see if it has the new
well,
language?
the report, for example, that was an addition. That was part of our amendment, section 10 near the bottom.
But, David's a smart guy. He probably said, why go through it twice? I'll just put this all.
Yeah, if it's all in there, let's look.
And
The report's in there.
the language about the grantees being public, that was the other flashpoint.
Okay.
So there were three things. Was that there was going to be statewide standards, so that the grantees were clear on the discretion of the department and the standards and criteria that were going to be consistent. Let me just find my.
Can I just ask, does this still need to go to the editors because the page numbers are all screwed up?
Yeah, we haven't signed off on this yet.
I can't find my.
Yeah, this includes the new stuff. So this puts back the entire VHIP language except for the money as
And plus the
amendment that we voted after we voted the committee bill out. So the process going forward is that,
Allison can do the whole thing.
okay, it's in your name right now as the lead, but I don't think that matters. She could stand
No.
up and do it. Okay.
So,
I
so-
think
So she'll stand up, she'll withdraw her earlier amendment.
right.
and then you'll do your new amendment that.
I don't need to. You're going to do all of it now. It's all in one.
Okay.
We took out a step and that,
Okay.
yeah.
Hadn't
So
under-
for,
Okay.
Looks good. So we just got to get it to the editor and up to Secretary Bloomer, and we're good to go.
yes. And so Keisha, when you said the page numbers are screwed up, I don't see that. What are you
don't say-
noticing?
They don't say like page 2 of 7. They all say page something of 1.
It's okay. It'll come out in the wash.
Yeah, I figured they'd catch
Just the
that.
way it's formatted, I think, at the moment. But the numbers are a little different. And so basically all I'm saying is this incorporates the intent of the Senate Appropriations Committee that was to put the language back in.
That's right. No, you don't even need to, you don't need to deal with appropriations has done their thing. Okay. Jane is not going to oppose this. She's already said, let's put the
Oh,
language back
stand
in.
up.
You're doing this as the committee.
Okay.
Okay. As our committee, I would just,
Say we're putting the language back in,
right.
but without the money, and the money is on the approps wall.
You got it.
Okay. I can say that like many other bills,
Exactly. It's going to be considered along with all the other competing interests in the big bill, but I'm really hoping that this will be a priority. So
Thank
I'm going to let David know we're good to go and you're the reporter.
I guess there I am. And what's our
Okay.
vote? I hope it's 5-0.
Oh, good point. It's a
being-
committee bill.
Well, it's
You don't
being-
need a committee.
It's being introduced individually, which it has to be, and we
Yeah.
has all our names.
Right. So we don't need,
Yeah, I'm
you don't
fine
need
with
to,
it.
Right. Okay, good. Because VHIP key. Okay, great.
okay. I'm going to take care of this. Thank
Thank-
you.
Thank you. Thank you for noticing it.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So is Damien by any chance?
Yeah. He's right here. He's right
Okay.
there. His face is right there.
So,
Good morning.
Good morning, Damien. So what we're going to do first is go through my amendment, which is the results of, I wouldn't say totally failed results of the endless negotiations I've had with Senator Brock. Some changes to S10, which we will need to forward officially to Senator Secretary Bloomer. So for the 100th time, let's walk through this strike all amendment to S10. I'm sure most of it is very familiar to folks, but there is some new language that Senator Brock has seen in various forms already, but some of the rest of you may not have. So
Yeah, let me just add one thing if I can at this point, is we have had a lot of discussion this past week. I mentioned to Senator Sorokin last night that my wife was concerned that I seemed to be spending a lot of time on the phone with someone late at night, but it was productive. And there are some things in this amendment that did come out of those discussions that make the bill more favorable to me, at least, than it was before. Unfortunately, we couldn't close the loop, but I do want to thank Senator Sorokin for all the effort that he put in to try to get us to a point that we could have agreement. And I think he did a great job there.
And the feeling is absolutely mutual. Thank you. Okay. So let me see if I get back here. Can we pull that up on the screen, Damien?
Absolutely. Okay, so this is the amendment. So it is a substitute amendment for the committee's amendment. Because it's not being offered by the committee, it would have to be offered by, I'm guessing, Senator Sorokin on the floor as a substitute. So section 1 is identical to the committee amendment. The same with section 2.
Just because this is our last visit with it, could you just say what it does as opposed to being identical? You could say it's identical, but say it again to refresh people's memory.
We had several committee amendments, so it would be good to.
I'm sure, Damon, you can do this in your sleep at this point.
Yeah, so section 1 is the COVID-19 benefit relief. So relief for employers' experience ratings for COVID-19 related benefits paid out during 2020. Section 2 is the relief for employers' experience ratings for COVID-19 related benefits paid out during calendar year 2021. And if you'll remember, the big factor for 2021 is that is when the rehire, offer to rehire, or have good cause for not offering to rehire requirement falls into place for employers. So it's to get relief from those benefits paid out in 2021. Section 3 extends the sunset on the good cause reasons, the good cause COVID related reasons to voluntarily quit your job and still be eligible for unemployment benefits, as well as the COVID-19 related experience rating relief for employers. And that extension is, that expires next Wednesday. So the effective dates later will make this section retroactive to next Wednesday. And the important thing to note is, as we discussed with Cameron, the reason we need to make it retroactive is for the very small number of individuals who may be filing a new claim between next Wednesday and whenever the governor signs this bill. So this is just to cover them. Everyone else will be able to, will not have an interruption with the way the department administers their claim. Section 4 is housekeeping language, really. It notwithstands. Was there a question?
I just wanted to go back, and this language, this amendment now contains the language around the state of emergency being terminated.
I think in the effective date section, it's somewhere.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So what this does is this repeals the COVID-19 related reasons to leave work and still be eligible for unemployment, as well as the the 2020 employer experience rating relief. And it extends all of that to the first day of the calendar quarter following when the state of emergency is lifted, or if that's within the last 30 days of the calendar quarter, say June 15th, the first day of the second calendar quarter following, just so you don't have like a 2-week tail.
Right. We discussed this in January. It seems like ages.
I know, I just wanted to remind myself what it applies to.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the first things we did, it seems a long time ago.
Can I
Yes.
ask a question, if I can, regarding section 4 on page 7, line 9? Is there a word missing between benefit and during?
Yeah, it should say extended benefit period. I'll add that and send a clean copy. Good catch. Thank you. That
Can you explain this?
I think so it should say, right now it says, for purposes of determining whether the state is in an extended benefit during the period from November 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2021. And it should say, for purposes of determining whether the state is in an extended benefit period during the period from, et cetera. So that is a good catch. It makes me wonder if that was just a typo as I was copying over the federal language, or if the word was missing from the federal language. I'm going to guess it was the former, but I will make that change and send a clean copy for the committee to vote on.
Can you just explain this section again?
Sure. Yeah, that is actually what I was about to do. So what this is really a housekeeping section for us. The Continuing Assistance Act that passed in December at the federal level. Typically, federal law requires us to wait a full calendar quarter between when an extended benefits period triggers off and then when it can trigger back on. And it's tied to the official unemployment rate, which, as we know, doesn't necessarily accurately reflect the number of people collecting unemployment. But that's a federal requirement, one that we can't change, unfortunately. So but what this does is it waives that waiting period for the state, so that if, for example, we have a spike in unemployment and then it drops and then we have another spike at some point before the end of the year, we'll be able to turn on extended benefits to give claimants that extra 13 weeks of benefits that they're entitled to, and they won't have to wait a full calendar quarter there. So that's all this does. Right now, our official unemployment rate is too low, so it doesn't have an immediate effect. But in the event that we have unemployment spikes later in the year, this could kick in and provide extended benefits to individuals.
So why are we sunsetting this on December 31st?
Because that's the federal requirement.
The federal law that passed in December gave states the opportunity to do this, but only for this period?
Yep, only for this period. And so this was literally taken directly from the language provided by federal DOL for enabling this.
What does our UI tax rate have to be? What does the unemployment rate have to be in order to trigger it?
So there are 3 different scenarios. And let me just pull them up because I will never remember them off the top of my head.
But
Senator Clarkson, you realize that if anybody asks that question, you're now responsible to answer it.
It would be good for some people to know if I don't think that they'll focus on this so much, and our tax rate already is so low, even though we know it isn't. it would be good to know what the trigger is that triggers back into those federal benefits.
Sure. So the extended benefit period begins the third week after there is a so-called on indicator. And the on indicators are the unemployment rates I've been talking about. So it looks at the calendar quarter going backwards, or the quarter going backwards from the current week. And so the unemployment rate has to equal or exceed 6% or equal or exceed 5% and be at least 120% above the average, or be 120% of the rates for the corresponding 13-week period in the previous 2 calendar years, or it has to equal or exceed 6.5% and be at least 110% of the rate for the corresponding quarters in the previous 2 calendar years. So it's not a very simplistic formula, but basically what you're looking at is it above 6%, or in the other instances there, is it above 5% and 120% of what it was in the previous 2 years during the same time. So, you're looking at elevated unemployment. And right now, I think Matt Barowitz is on. I don't know what the official unemployment rate is for the state right now, but I believe we're below the triggering point.
Yeah, clearly we're below it. So thank you. I think we should have that in our back pocket.
Yeah, that's all this does, is it leaves it there in case we need it. But if employment numbers continue to stay steady or improve, it's something that we won't need. So it's just there in case we need it. And it's something we're not normally allowed to do.
And this is something that was requested by the department, if I recall.
Yes. Okay, so section 5 is the weekly benefits. So the change from the underlying committee bill here is that it keeps the weekly benefit amount the same as it is currently, but it adds a $50 weekly dependent benefit allowance if the individual has 1 or more dependent children under 18 years of age. And that language will be contingent on the unemployment insurance trust fund being projected to remain above $90 million or above through the end of this year and the end of 2022. Yes.
Sorry, I can't see you, Senator Brock. Go ahead.
I understand. Just a question on the $50 benefit. If there are if there's a family consisting of 2 parents, do they both get $50? Let's say they have 1 child.
Yes, the way this is worded right now, it does not require the department to consider whether there is another parent in the household that's also receiving the $50. So if you have both parents out of work, they would get $50 each in a weekly dependent benefit. And that,
I'm sorry.
We when we talked about this, I don't know if you recall, I turned to the commissioner and said, what would you prefer? We can have it a maximum of $50, and it doesn't matter how many kids you have, or would you have it based upon the claimant themselves? And he said he would prefer to have it written so that if there are 2 people on unemployment, that they would both get the $50 dependency benefit. And then he also said it would cost about 3% more, like 3% of the households that would qualify would be in this situation. So that we just went with his choice at that point. I said, what's the easier? Because as you know, he has concerns about the mainframe and stuff like that. And he said he'd rather see it this way.
Is the intent of this that there would be in effect self-attestation as to the child benefit as to who's entitled to it?
That's a good question. I think it would be left to the department to establish rules and procedures. but I read somewhere, and I was going to ask Damien that, uh, is it in any way tied into claiming dependence on uh, the tax return, or the same kind of standard, or, um, I mean, I think,
So, uh, so this is separate from income tax law. So it'll be up to the department to determine how they ask for this and what proof they require around this. And we are not specific on that. One thing that's worth noting is, just like misrepresenting your wages, this is also subject to not only the recoupment of overpayment, but the potential $5,000 administrative fine for intentionally misrepresenting something in order to receive a greater benefit. But yeah, at this point, this is silent on what exactly, besides saying a dependent child under 18 years of age. It'll be up to the department to clarify any issues around what that is. But I would defer to them to speak to this. I know with other states, as we discussed a few weeks ago, the definition of dependent varies. And so it could include adults who, because of a disability, are unable to work or something like that, or unable to care for themselves. In Vermont, we're limiting it just to children under 18 years of age who are unemancipated. So
I would assume then that the department would have to establish procedures to deal with all of the complexities associated with it. An example is shared custody arrangements. You have two people who have a child and there's a shared custody arrangement. How would you deal with that? And the department would have to come up with procedures for those kinds of situations, I assume.
Yeah, I would agree. This is not something we want to start mandating in statute, how they determine it. I think we try to keep it as simple as possible. We were not insensitive to the concerns of the department. That's why we went with not trying to say 1, 2, or 3 children, and they suggested doing it by claimant and just a flat $50. We made it as simple as possible. And in some ways, it's more restrictive than the 13 other states that I've seen who have different dependency things that are broader than just kids. So kids in college that are up to 24 years of age and stuff like that. So we just, this is classic. I mean, there's probably plenty of places in the unemployment where we don't get that specific in terms of the requirement of how they're going to determine that. I mean, if they go too far, we'll hear about it. If they go too lenient, we'll hear about it. But up to this point, we're just leaving it to them.
I would like to ask the department when they come in if they need any enabling language to talk to the tax department around this, because even if you have shared custody, only one person can file for having a dependent. If you're married filing jointly, you're not claiming 2 separate dependents in the same family. So, I think we should talk to them about their ability to communicate with tax.
Okay.
Okay, so section 6 repeals that, and this is tied to 5 years after the effective date of the first section. And as we discussed yesterday, that's going to be tied to the end of the federal pandemic unemployment compensation, which is the $300 federal supplement on top of your regular unemployment benefits, currently scheduled to occur on September 6th.
May I have a question about that?
Yes.
And that is, if the federal benefit is extended beyond September, is that allowed for under this revision?
Yeah, the way this is worded here is it's tied to the date on when that terminates. And I've worded it as provided in the federal statute as amended. So each time they've extended it, they've amended the federal statute where it's set out. So my expectation is that they would just continue amending that date what they've done in the last two bills is they've struck through the date for expiration and replaced it with a new one. So I would expect that they continue to do that.
Senator Brock, I know you and I had discussed this, and I had agreed that it would start whenever the federal benefits ended, even including if they continued. And I picked up on that last night and asked Damien to change it to
Good.
reflect the understanding we had.
Outstanding.
Okay, so the rate schedule here. So section 7 sets the tax rate schedule, and what it does is it freezes the tax rate schedule at Schedule 1 for the benefit year beginning on July 1, 2021. Again, that won't take effect if on April 15th, the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund is projected to drop below $90 million before the end of the year. There is no adjustment for the rate schedule for the year beginning July 1, 2022. That is addressed in Section 8, which is the avoidance of long-term rate impacts on employers. It provides that beginning July 1, 2022 and ending on June 30th, 2031, the Commissioner of Labor would reduce the amount of unemployment insurance contributions made by employers by a total of $66.5 million. So while tax rates will go up, what this does is it provides that the Commissioner can use any means permitted under federal law and notwithstands any provisions of our law to the contrary to accomplish proportionate reductions spread out over that 10-year period. In addition to that, there is a study later on regarding what the balance of the trust fund should be, which would then provide the basis for the legislature to come back and amend the formula for future years so that you don't have a number of years in there where you're at Schedule 5 with the Commissioner adjusting tax rates down incrementally to provide the additional relief. And the $66.5 million is based on the savings that we're expected to see from freezing the taxable wage base and holding the tax schedule at Schedule 1.
Well, one thing, a question in terms of clarity. This 66.5 million would be a way to reduce the contributions by employers over this 10-year period. But it's unclear to me as to where the money is coming from, other than from the trust fund itself that the employers are paying into to begin with. So where's the money coming from?
Well, we've had this discussion many times.
I know, and I think I want to have it on the record. So
I know.
It's
I was going to say Groundhog's Day.
It's coming from the trust fund. It's
Okay.
essentially the long-term problem you and I are trying to fix is to get the trust fund balance down. Let's say it's projected at $1 billion now, and we want to get it down to 500 million. This bill makes a small bite at that. It brings it down to by 66 and 38 for the benefit side. So it brings the trust fund balance with these changes will now go down to 900,000. That's a very simplistic answer.
Yeah.
That's
well, the simplistic argument is that the way that you get the reduction in the contributions from employers is to reduce the size of the trust fund balance. So essentially what you're doing is you are saying that we're going to reduce the balance. We're not going to give the employer something. We're just going to reduce the overpayment.
So what do you say, Senator Brock? What do you say, Senator Brock, to the person I talked to in my district who has over 100 employees, who's facing a $42,000 increase if we do nothing? But if we do this, he saves $42,000. I don't
Well, he
know.
isn't saving it because he's paying it in the end. In any case,
that's what this does.
Well, he does. Yeah, I see what you're saying is that you're reducing the total value of the trust fund balance by that amount.
Right. That's what we're trying to
The
do.
question, of course, is what's the right amount in the trust fund balance in the first place?
That's the next section.
Yeah. And then you're having a study to do that, but the assumption is that you can reduce the balance as is in this fashion. I just want to be clear on
Say that last part again.
it. You're saying that the way that we are saving employers money is we're reducing the trust fund balance,
Right.
but without looking at whether or not we have the right balance to begin with. I think we
Right.
largely agree that we are overcharging to begin with, which is why we have this estimate of $1 billion at the end of 10 years, because
Right.
the formula is broken.
Right. I agree.
But that isn't really a savings, it's a reduction in future overpayments that the present system would create.
But we heard from the commissioner yesterday at the AGC meeting, we can't say right now that it's an overpayment. You know, the study would be able to say, this is probably the right amount needed. But even the commissioner yesterday wasn't willing to say, yes, I feel comfortable excluding 2020. I think he said he might be comfortable with more of an average of the years, but we never heard even from the administration that they are comfortable with an exclusion of 2020. And so this is saying this is a small step while we figure out if we can drastically reduce the overall amount that we think is needed. But that would be a pretty drastic step without even having the commissioner saying.
Just, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but simplistically, the way I view this is that there was concern that this was not tax relief. It was more like borrowing a loan. So we put this section in to make it clear that they're going to pay less taxes, and in the out years, it wouldn't be recovered. Where the money comes from is effectively the trust fund balance, just like the $50 dependency comes from the trust fund balance. I feel comfortable. The two numbers here of the tax reduction and the benefits total about $100 million. I feel very comfortable if the chart Matt gave us showed $900 million versus $1 billion at the end of that time. And in the following section, I want to go even further and get the right number. And also, it will be the exact same kind of solution. There may be benefits going up and there may be taxes going down, but the net result of that reduces the size of the trust fund balance to the right level. So the money's just not sitting in the bank earning 1 or 2%. It's being pumped into the economy. So that's the answer. But I can't answer any better than that, Senator Brock. But if you want to get this 66 million 3 times, I guess we could put it in another way. Okay.
Okay. Put things back up. Okay, so
one of the other things I did want to say on this is, I don't know who it was. It may have been you, Senator Brock, but somebody threw out the idea that I think is somewhat brilliant. This gives the commissioner a lot of discretion on how to make sure the employers save that amount of money. Well, one thing we've never talked about is potentially tweaking the taxable wage base down in future years. And that could be another maybe simple way of assuring that, as opposed to playing with the schedules. So
I hope they address all of that as they look at the formula, whatever the formula is.
They will for the
Yeah.
future. I'm just talking about this section.
Yeah, adjusting the tax rate is a much more direct and clear way of actually accomplishing it and reducing the amount of money paid in.
Right. And
but as part of the tax rate, it's a combination of those percentages and to what wages it applies to. So if it applies to 13.5 versus 14.1, everybody's percentage rate stays the same and everybody gets proportionally the same amount of reduction as what they would have had.
Don't we freeze there are 2 pieces to tax relief in this bill. One is freezing the rate schedule and the other is freezing the taxable wage base.
Yep, but the commissioner can go further with this authority.
Absolutely. I think that this gives him or her discretion, him at the moment, discretion to review the entire formula, which is what I think we're hoping for. We don't
Well,
have
that's
the,
absolutely necessary. I agree.
Okay, well, that's the bigger picture in that we're going to probably deal with next year. But this is the short-term fix to prevent against rate shock for the employers and to help people with dependents. So let's go on, Damien. Sorry.
That's okay. So the next section is what Senator Clarkson was just talking about. It freezes the taxable wage base at $14,100 for calendar year 2022. Again, it's got if the trust fund is projected to drop below $90 million, it will not occur. And then for 2023, calendar year 2023, what it provides is that the taxable wage base, absent any other adjustments in the interim, will bounce back to what it would have been if we didn't freeze it this year. So it directs the department to basically do the 2-year calculation to figure out what it would have been, and that would be the 2023 taxable wage base. Section 10 is the study that we've been talking about. It directs the Commissioner of Labor to conduct a review of the solvency of the trust fund for the period that began on January 1, 2000 through the present, and the impact on the trust fund of the statutes related to unemployment insurance contributions and benefits, and any changes made to those statutes during that time period. So that's important because it allows us to look at both the pre-Great Recession and post-Great Recession impacts on the trust fund with the changes that we made in the Great Recession. And so essentially this is a look back over the past 20 years to say, what have we seen with the recessions we've experienced and the changes we've made to how we provide benefits and require unemployment insurance contributions, and then use that. And then it directs the commissioner to include an assessment and consideration of the amount necessary to ensure the continued solvency of the trust fund during a future economic recession based on the economic cycles that were experienced during that time period, and how potential future statutory changes related to contributions and benefits may impact the amount determined pursuant, or may impact the amount necessary to ensure the solvency. And then to develop a range of amounts needed to ensure the continued solvency of the trust fund based on the potential future statutory changes considered during the review. So the language here basically says it doesn't require the commissioner to consider everything. It requires the commissioner to consider some potential changes and then to develop a range of amounts based on those. That the idea is to basically give the legislature, we consider changes next year, the tools to say, so if we were to do tax relief and benefit increase, it looks like the balance would need to be X. If we did nothing, it looks like the balance would need to be Y. If we did some other combination of changes to the statutes, it looks like the balance would need to be Z. In conducting the review, the commissioner is directed to convene and consult with a working group composed of representatives of employers and employees, economists, and other individuals with relevant knowledge or experience as determined. Oh, that's a typo in there. It should just say as determined by the commissioner. So I will also make that change in the clean version that you vote. And then it requires the commissioner to provide the members of the working group with an opportunity to review and comment on the analysis and determinations that the commissioners made with respect to the trust fund solvency. And then it requires a report on or before November 15th, documenting the results of the review and the consultation with the working group, including a detailed explanation of the potential statutory changes considered, and the basis for the amounts determined. So basically, what changes did you consider and why did you arrive at the amount that you arrived at? And then also to specifically identify the members of the working group, summarize their comments regarding the analysis and determinations, identify any revisions that were made based on the comments received, and then finally to provide each member of the working group with an opportunity to submit a written statement responding to the review that would be included in the report. So this gives you the department's review and analysis, and then also allows the employers and employee groups and other members of the working group to say, I agree with the department's analysis, or I disagree, and I think the answer should have been this, or I think that you undercounted this, or something like that. Again, the idea is to give the legislature a jump start on its analysis of this issue for next year.
So one question I have, and given that we're making some changes already that we have to send to the editor, is there a magic, and I'm sure Cameron would possibly appreciate this, is there any magic in the date being November 15th? If we're not coming back until the beginning of January, do we need this report 45 days in advance, and why not give them another month or so to do the report?
So the only magic with that relate to the introduction deadlines for the second year of the biennium.
Right.
Both the House and the Senate have to at least request legislation by the beginning of December, and then we have to have it drafted by the end of December. We could move it to December 15th, and then the request could go in early December to say, draft me a proposal based on that, and then we fine tune the language, but it's just getting tight at that point. The other option, and
Damien, may I just interject in your thoughts? Because this gives us the opportunity to actually meet as a committee to review this and have a bill, to begin the work, and at least get a placeholder bill in before the deadline of whatever it is, usually the first week of December.
How are we meeting as a committee before December?
We might get permission. We know somebody who might be able to influence that.
Okay.
I would agree. I think it's a great idea of something that we ought to discuss. This is an important enough issue.
Yes.
And that we need to be prepared going out the gate in early January to get this moving in time for it to really be effective.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
Noted. So noted.
Thank you. You're our mole into major decisions being made about what we can or cannot do.
okay. So the effective dates here, basically the Section 5, as we discussed, takes effect on the termination date for the federal pandemic unemployment compensation as amended. And then Section 6 takes effect 5 years after the effective date of Section 5. And then notwithstanding those effective dates, they shall not take effect if the balance is projected to drop below 90 million on or before the end of this year. And then the remaining sections take effect on passage, provided that the extension of the sunset applies retroactively to March 31st, the sunset date.
Right.
May I ask a question just in general? Where did the $90 million figure come from, Mr. Chair? And do we know that, are we comfortable that that's a good number as a target?
It came from the administration. It came both last September and we can hear from Cameron again. They have not necessarily objected to that throughout this entire process. It's designed because most of their money in terms of contributions come in March or April, because people are paid on the first $14,000 of a calendar year. They needed to have enough money to be comfortable to know that they get through that quarter until they got the large share of their contributions coming in. And that's the number they they picked, and we really haven't changed it since. So.
Mhm.
We could have Cameron talk about it if you want. It'd be very disappointing to hear at this late date that they have a problem with that.
Well, yeah, I agree, but I'm just a comfort level as to where did the number come from and how was it arrived at? I don't recall testimony that told us that.
No, they did. He testified very eloquently as to how they came
Okay.
up with that number. But anyhow, so that's the bill. I'm gonna give Cameron a chance to tell us how much he loves it. And this is what we will be presenting on the floor this morning as a substitute amendment with the two small changes that Damien will make. Damien, could you, Secretary Bloomer asked that we get him this as soon as possible. And even though we haven't voted on it yet, he said he would like to work with it, and assuming that it will be voted, if we do make any changes before the vote, he'll be able to accommodate that. But if you can get him this revised version, that would be helpful to the Senate. Thank you.
Sure, I'll send that over right now. I just finished the revisions. They don't need to be edited. It was just a couple of word changes. So I trust that I got it right. So I'll send that to the committee and Secretary Bloomer right now.
Okay, so Cameron, we're about to vote on this. I want to hear your comments, but I hope that that they're not earth-shattering.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Cameron Wood, Unemployment Insurance Director for the Vermont Department of Labor, for the record. I'll try to be very brief. I don't want to hold the bill up any longer at this point. I think, the department's position is pretty clear as it relates to the additional benefits. I'm not going into any of that. As far as the new provisions go, in our initial conversation with Matt, I think there is some concern about how we will implement the 66 million, relief over the next 10 years. But again, I don't want to do anything earth shattering here. I mean, I think that's just a conversation we'll continue to have as this bill moves forward.
Exactly. You could do that in the House and
right.
come up with a better paradigm. We're all ears.
Right. And Mr. Chair, like you said, it gives us discretion. So our initial reaction was a little concerning, but again, nothing earth shattering there to hold this up. Obviously we would have concerns about getting you a report by November, just with all the work that we have going on. But I also can fully recognize in my position that if we are going to have a substantive conversation, then that work needs to be done. And it was work that the department had intended to do prior to the pandemic. So, again, I don't want to do anything earth shattering or say anything earth shattering there. I think it's work that will be needed to further the conversation. And I think we'll have to do our best to try to get it done. To the only other comment I was going to mention, unless there's any questions, Senator Brock, to your last point, the 90 million was, we offered that last year because what we felt was, with the claims volume we had at the time, that we would need approximately $90 million to get us through a winter into April, which, as the chair mentioned, is our biggest contribution quarter. So it would give us enough cushion to get us through to interject, our first quarter. Matt, jump in here and correct me if I'm wrong, but we usually take in around $50-60 million in the first quarter. And so we felt that was the money that we needed at the time, based on the claims volume. And I think our anticipation is, over this year in 2021, vaccines continue to roll out, businesses continue to open, people will be able to go back to work. So our claims volume will obviously be further decreased. And so 90 million should give us enough cushion to get through a winter, which is usually our busiest time, money going out the door and not necessarily coming in.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Other than that, Mr. Chair, unless there's questions, I'm those were just the comments that I had initially.
Mr. Chair, I do have a question.
Go
And
ahead.
that is, during the discussion on the bill earlier, Commissioner Harrington raised severe concerns repeatedly about the effect of this bill on the systems and the potential, given the fragility of the unemployment system, that there could be a catastrophic result. Now, with the passage of time and your review of how you would implement the provisions of this, plus the changes in the bill that have occurred since then, with some of that in mind, what's the department's position about the system impact that you fear, if any?
Thank you for the question, Senator Brock. I mean, I think our position would remain the same. I mean, our concern at this point, as the commissioners mentioned, through the entire session, is any additional changes that we make in programming could potentially have an effect on the system's capacity to continue to function. We've seen that throughout the past year with the pandemic. We've had to go in. We've been very fortunate that we had some programming foundation to work from based on the last recession, but it has not been easy. And we've had a lot of problems in trying to get the CARES Act programs to work and in trying to get the changes to the benefit amounts to work properly. And our big concern is our capacity to go in and now make additional changes that, we don't have a foundation to build off necessarily, and the impacts that it could have. I mean, at the end of the day, if the committee wants us to do this, then it gets passed, then we're going to be obligated to do it. But we just want to be very clear that we have serious concerns about our capacity to implement this and the potential consequences that could happen with our mainframe. We don't know. I don't know.
Well, I think what you've indicated is that there's some things, such as changes in rates, that are relatively straightforward because you do that from time to time anyway. There are other changes, though, that are brand new, such as a dependency benefit. If you look at the components of the bill, at what this bill asks you to do, where do you see the biggest risks and where are your greatest concerns?
My greatest concerns right now are the changes to the benefit amounts, even something as simple as changing the divider from 45. We've never done it. We've never done it since I've been here and talking with my team. It hasn't been done in the past 20 years.
Cameron, it's not in the amendment anymore.
Okay. Sorry, I don't have the most recent draft. So the dependent benefit, I think, is one that I think we have the biggest concern, just because it's new. And how do we implement that in the system where it doesn't exist? How do we ensure that, as we've testified in the past, that we have to collect the information on the front end in one system, it has to feed into our VABS mainframe, and then it has to also communicate back to our tax system. So that benefit by itself, we're tweaking, all three of our major programs, our claimant portal, our benefit system, and our tax system, and the information has to be collected and it has to go through the entire process. That's probably the one that I have the most concern about.
What could be the impact of those concerns based on your best estimate of where you are from a risk perspective?
I think our commissioners testified in the past, and I agree with it and support it because we run into it, weekly. I mean, there are times where our system goes down, and the customers have probably experienced this. If they call our claim center at a given time and our system is down, then our customer service representatives can't even help them because you can't even look them up. And so, that's our concern, is we may be able to make these additional changes and we may be able to put them into production, but there are times when our system goes down. We have to work to try to bring it back. Our ADS partners work, sometimes throughout the night to bring our systems back up if it happens off hours. That's our concern, is, it is a very fragile system, and We recognize that we've done a lot to it over the past year to make it work for this pandemic. And again, our testimony has just been that we're concerned about additional changes to it and the impact that it could have. The overall impact, the worst case scenario, is the system goes down and doesn't come back. And then, we have backups of the system, but if we don't have a platform to run it on, then we're back to doing unemployment insurance by paper.
So, as you know, Cameron, I'm not fully buying the complexity of the
Yes, sir.
change, but
Yes, sir.
but does the 2 months plus 1 week extra time in terms of implementing the benefit that is changed from the previous bill, does that help? And also, is there any more information you will be able to share with the House over the next few weeks in terms of looking at how this could possibly be done, consulting with somebody and trying to figure that out to give a greater degree of comfort if it looks like this bill is going forward? Because there's many potentially different ways that I see how you could get this benefit out. Even, maybe it's not that many people. It's a flat thing, and it may even be done in a separate way. My concern about this whole thing is that what does that say to policymakers in the legislature? We have to just stop dead in our tracks because of a machine. We see a good policy we want to implement, and the administration comes in and says, sorry, we can't do it, even though, it may be a good idea. There's no way to do it. And in this day and age, getting out 3,000 or 6,000 checks of $50 to people that are, who have identified themselves as having kids just seems so, we're going around in circles on this again. So
again, Mr. Chair, I agree with you. I will say, I think you guys know the department's position. I will say, I think any additional time is always going to be of a benefit, right? I mean, I think assuming there is no additional changes in the CARES Act or nothing else that, gets added on at the exact point in time where we're trying to now implement 2 systems at once or 2 new programs at once, which that's a hypothetical, which none of us know would happen. So I don't want that to drive anything here. But I mean, obviously, I think the time frame is of a benefit. It gives us somewhat of a runway to try to do something and make sure it will work.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Senator Rahm.
So this is in no way meant to argue about the dependent benefit. First, I just want to say, Cameron, if it is the will of the legislature, thank you for implementing it, even though it's challenging. And often we tend to look at benefits and fixing our systems after catastrophic economic events. Many states added the dependent benefit after the Great Recession, because they were looking at how to improve the system. We're also talking about changing the formula to improve the system. So unfortunately, we tend to do more work in the aftermath of an economic catastrophe. So thank you if it ultimately becomes law for implementing it. I actually didn't know if we could change the conversation to ask about what businesses seem to be most concerned about, which is people being encouraged and supported to get back to work. And you all are the Department of Labor. I know this isn't your area of particular expertise, but it felt relevant before we passed this bill to just talk about how we might have future conversations after this bill about supporting people to get back to work, initiatives that you all have to help encourage people to get back to work. I think that's the concern we're hearing from businesses, and we keep trying to say we can't change the federal benefits. If people are going to go back to work this summer, the Department of Labor has some work to do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is can be a challenging topic, especially with some employers that I've had. I mean, on the one hand, I think we have a lot of employers who are saying that they need workers, and we're trying to be sensitive to that. Also recognizing that we are still in a pandemic, we are still seeing individuals being affected by this disease, and so we're trying to balance that when it comes to work search requirements, for example. We also have to recognize that it was commented yesterday, or by one of the employer groups. My days are running together. Whatever day that was, we had them in. Yes, it is a requirement that when someone is offered suitable work, they have to accept it. However, the individual can have good cause for refusing it. And, we have expanded those. We've testified to the committee in the past. If the individual doesn't have childcare, if the individual is taking care of somebody who is, immunocompromised, who, has been advised not to go out in the public. So these are reasons that in the past would totally deny someone unemployment. If you don't have childcare, therefore you can't look for work, you're not available for work, you're not eligible for unemployment. And as challenging as I know that is, for a lot of people, that's the federal system that we work under. We've been able to relax a lot of that. And so on the one hand, we can force people to go back to work. We have kind of relaxed some of those parameters, but I also hear, and I try to be very clear with employers, sometimes I hear, but they want to do what's right for their employees too. It's endearing that employers want to help their employees. And so we've also heard some employers that will lay their people off because they will make more money on unemployment. And my communication to the employer community has always been, they sometimes say, we don't want to report our employees. We don't want to get them in trouble. And I always try to tell them, our job is to make sure that we're providing out benefits to those people who are eligible for them. And our job at the same time, on the flip side of that coin, is to make sure that people who aren't eligible for benefits are not receiving them. And at the end of the day, what I tell employers, keep in mind, you may not be impacting yourself. You may be impacting someone else. If the benefits are being charged to a different employer, you not refusing that return to work is charging that employer. It's not charging you. So that's one piece of this. I know this is a very challenging conversation about how do we get people back to looking for work, get them back to seeking employment. We do have programs for that, and I think we're always happy to come in and talk about them. There is one program that is under my umbrella in unemployment insurance. It's actually called the Resea Program, which stands for Reemployment Services and Eligibility Assessment. And what we do is we actually bring in individuals who, prior to the pandemic, it was designed to bring in people who were most likely to exhaust their benefits. So we run all of our claimants through a profiling model that was developed by Matt and the Labor Market Information Division in conjunction with UI. We identify people who are most likely to exhaust their benefits, and then we bring them into the office for one-on-one, job counseling and employment assessment to figure out what do they need to help get reemployed into a more sustainable job. The challenge there is all that was kind of shut down when the pandemic happened. Our offices obviously had to close down. And so we're just now in a position where we're starting to ramp that program back up. It's actually something we started sending out some letters just this week to people to try and bring that program back, knowing that, again, the vaccines are being rolled out, employers are starting to open back up. We're really starting to try and shift our focus on how do we help get people reemployed. I appreciate your comment, Senator Rahm, because I do think it is really important, and that is where the conversation needs to start shifting. How do we get people back to employment?
Okay. Cameron, just as a preview, I'm going to thank you on the floor today, but I want to thank you here as well. I mean, you guys, we may not have agreed on everything, but you guys and Damien have been amazing in terms of, God, I think we must have had 25 hearings on this bill. So what I'd like
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, Matt is also on the call. I think that extends to Matt.
Absolutely, Matt. I can't see you. So thank you very much. It's been all. Anyhow, so what I'd like to do now is just see a show of hands. I think we know what they're going to be, and I took the liberty of putting, at this point, and you saw it, I put the 4 Democrats on the proposed substitute amendment, but now obviously I'm going to have to report on the floor that the committee supports that by whatever vote we have. So for the formal purposes, can I just see a show of hands of who supports this substitute amendment and opposed? Thank you all. Okay. So we're going to move on. Yes.
Nathan, can you get me I think we probably do need a record of action on that one.
Oh,
I don't-
we
we're, just-
definitely-
we're proposing an amendment. I'm not sure we just agreed 4-1 to
Oh.
do it. I don't think we have to send anything up.
Okay.
No,
Keep
there's
moving.
nothing that has to be done for amendments. I just have to write one up on the administrative side just to say that the committee took this action.
So can we, thank you. Oh, wait, actually, Cameron, we still may need, I don't think we need Manning. We're going to talk about fraud, but I'd like to do that offline now because I'm talking about process here with Senator Brock. I don't know fully what his intentions are, but I want to get that down and then we can get more into the substance of his amendment, which I think he sent around to everybody. So can we go off live